So I think you'll find the following interview with John Humphreys very interesting. He's the president of the Australian Libertarian Society and was the founder of the Liberal Democratic Party, of which Australian Senator David Leyonhjelm is probably the most well-known figure. But before we get to the interview, I just want to take this opportunity to promote the Friedman 17 Liberty Conference and offer you, dear listener, a couple of special offers. So for the first 10 people to contact me, you can either have a 50% discount on the full ticket price or a free day pass on Sunday, which is the day I'll be taking part in a panel discussion, and my session will be followed by the much anticipated Mark Latham and Ross Cameron. The standard ticket price for the whole event is $500, so that will be cut to $250, and if you buy a second ticket, you'll get a further $50 off that price. The day pass is usually worth about $30 or $40. So if that sounds like a good deal to you, contact me through YouTube Messenger. The tickets are only available until midnight Sunday, April 23rd, but the free day passes can be obtained after that. But I wouldn't leave it too late if you're interested. Also, in honour of Milton Friedman, I've created a few t-shirts to mark the occasion and with a few of my favourite Milton Friedman quotes. Seriously, how could you not want to walk around with a picture of Milton Friedman on your t-shirt, especially if you're a liberal arts student? Anyway, you can check those out in the IM store, link in the description. So without any further ado, here is John Humphreys. Welcome back to the interview, and today I have a very, very special guest by the name of Mr. John Humphreys. He is the president of the Australian Libertarian Society and one of the co-organisers of this year's Friedman Libertarian Conference. Welcome, John.
Yeah, g'day. I am. What do I call you? Independent man?
Oh, Indie's good. Yeah.
Right.
And you know, the whole reason we're doing this is because you've made me stay anonymous for the big reveal on Sunday, isn't it?
Yes. On Sunday we've got a panel at the Friedman Conference on what I call alt media. I guess it's just anybody that doesn't toe the orthodoxy of mainstream media. And I think, did I ask you or did you volunteer that would use this as an opportunity to uncover the man behind the mask?
Yeah, you suggested it, and I think it's a good idea. But I think the thing is that people might be expecting that I'm actually a somebody, and so they're thinking like, oh, independent man, he might be, it might be Ray Hadley, and Ray Hadley walks out. Oh, it's Ray Hadley's independent man, something like that, and. Actually,
so you don't want me to tell people that you're actually Mark Latham.
It's I'm just going to walk out and they're going to go, oh, it's that guy who's anonymous and we've never seen before or heard of.
It'll be fun.
So that's good. I'm glad you've set me up for that, because I was just looking through the list, and I'm the only person that's not using their real name, by the looks of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So well. That'll be. Go ahead.
For listeners out there that are curious, tickets stop being on sale in, I think, 1 or 2 days. Mm-hmm. But we can arrange a few deals for some of your listeners if people are wanting to come along. Okay.
That would be fabulous. I will put that information in the description box of this interview.
You could do something like if the first 10 people to contact you can either have a free day pass when you're speaking or a half price pass to the whole thing.
Oh, that sounds good. And could you just run through the prices for the people out there?
The standard package is the 3 days, the cocktail night on Friday, the gala dinner on Saturday, and that's $500. So with 50% off, that's $250.
Yep.
The day passes are, I don't have it off the top of my head, but they're normally about $30 or $40.
Okay. Yep.
The main cost is the cocktail party and the dinner.
Yeah. Yep.
Dinner is worth going to. We've got Grover Norquist from the Americans for Tax Reform speaking at the dinner.
That's the dinner on Saturday night? Or
yes.
Yeah.
And Nick Gillespie speaking at the cocktail night on Friday.
Yeah.
Along with Tim Wilson.
Well, maybe let's go back a bit and save that for a little bit later. You sent me through a few of the things. You've been a pretty busy boy. You founded the Australian Libertarian Society in 2000, is that right?
Yes, ironically while I was working for the government.
Is that why you did it? Did they force?
No, I mean, I was planning on doing it anyway as I was finishing uni. And then I got a job to go and work at the Treasury, Canberra Treasury.
Yeah.
or the Australian Treasury in Canberra. And that's where I was, where I put together the ALS, the Australian Libertarian Society.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where I was working which is presumably the next thing you were going to raise. That's where I was working when I started the Liberal Democrats. Mm-hmm. So that's a wonderful little irony of the Lib Dems. It was started by a public servant. The first time we ran for office, which was the ACT election in 2001, we had 7 candidates and 6 were public servants.
Wow. I guess that's not unusual in Canberra.
Well, yes, indeed. It's...
Yeah. So you were a candidate 4 times.
Yeah. When the party first started, I was running it for the first 5 or so years. So I was running as a candidate back then, 2001, 2004. Mm. And then 2007 is the first time we went federal. And then I ran last year up in Brisbane.
And how did you do last year?
I was running for the lower house, so I was running to support our Senate candidate. We have no chance of winning in the lower house yet. Yeah. But hopefully by building a profile or having preferences to pressure the major parties, we can help our Senate candidate. And we got very close. Gabe Buckley, who was also speaking at the Friedman conference, he looked like he was going to get in. He got pipped at the last minute by Malcolm Roberts.
Oh, really? That's a pity.
We have both Gabe Buckley and Malcolm Roberts speaking at the Friedman conference. So they can face off against each other.
Good. Maybe they can have an arm wrestle or something.
They're both nice people.
Yeah. So how was your time in Treasury?
Oh, it's a bit of a love-hate relationship. I often joke about it as being, I did my undergrad and I did my postgrad, then I worked at Treasury and then I got a job. It was like, in my mind, I kind of treat it like an extended part of my education. It was very useful in that sense. Although to my frustration, but it also benefits me. To this day, if people are trying to say something nice about me, I'm often introduced as a former Treasury official, which in my mind is nowhere near the most important thing I've done.
No, but I guess Treasury's got a good reputation because Australia's been 26 years without a recession, and Treasury pats themselves on the back as if they had something to do with it.
Yes, I think there are plenty of good people at Treasury, and they deserve a reputation for being better than the average part of the government. Mm-hmm. It's Treasury and finance are the 2 parts that aren't run entirely by the left.
Yeah.
But the reputation is higher than it deserves to be.
Right.
We'll make plenty of mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the fact that we haven't had a recession in 25 years, there's a lot of luck that goes into that, not just good management.
And a lot of the reforms of the Hawke-Keating government that are still flowing through.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a little sidetrack we can take there, because as I mentioned to you previously, I left Australia in December of 2001, and I didn't come back until February of 2016. So I missed that 15-year period. Now I did come back from time to time, and I did kind of vaguely keep up with what was going on. And I remember Mark Latham's candidacy. I'm pretty sure I put in a postal vote for him. When he lost, I kind of lost interest because I was a Labor voter. I voted Keating twice. First time I could vote was Fightback, 1991, and I voted for him in 93, and then 96. I forget who I voted for. I don't know. I might have voted for Kim Beazley once. I'm not sure. I voted for Latham.
Latham was the first time I voted for Labor.
What's that, sorry?
Latham was the first time I voted for Labor. I've always liked him.
Yeah.
I've always thought him new to something else.
Yeah, and when I came back, as I mentioned to you, I did not recognise the Labor Party. It's not the Labor Party of Hawke-Keating. It was not the Labor Party of, understanding that business is the driver of the economy and that government should get out of the way to a certain extent, that we should concentrate on privatisation, productivity, efficiency. And you look at the Labor Party today and it's a big socialist government project that doesn't resemble...
I agree there's been a big change, but I think if you go back before Keating, there were plenty of people who didn't want to privatise in the Labor Party.
Sure.
But I still think there's been a change from that era as well, in that in the era of Keating, in the era of pre-Keating, in the era of Latham, the Labor Party represented the working man.
Yeah.
The everyday person. And now it seems quite clear that they represent the inner city trendy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The green left university student from UCID who's protesting everything and always being offended.
Yeah.
That's the core constituency of the Labour Party now. And you can see why that would alienate, working class regional union members.
Yeah. Yeah. I think actually Mark Latham said the worst thing that happened to the left is they got wealthy. That's one.
Yes. I think there's a big distinction between the poor left and the rich left. And I think as time goes on, people on the right are realizing that the poor left aren't the enemy. They can be useful allies sometimes.
Yeah.
And the rich left are the people who are actually to be a bit cliche, the cultural Marxist crowd.
Yeah, the boutique issues and the identity politics, which does not speak at all to the working class, and that's what you saw play out in the United States in that election, in the swing states. If you've been told every day of the week that you're a horrible racist misogynist just because you're a white male, when you look around yourself and your life's not that good because there's not much in the way of job opportunities, communities are kind of breaking down. It's hard to sort of what happened to the left that stood up for the working class man? Well, they're too busy sipping lattes and getting offended by things.
Well, now it's Bob Catter and Pauline Hanson trying to speak to that exact same crowd. I think it's I think Howard Battlers was a bit of a pre-echo of this movement. I don't think the Green Left was quite as obnoxious back then, but it was starting.
Yeah.
And I think Howard Battlers was this appeal, working class people deciding to vote for their union party or to vote for the party that's speaking to their culture.
Yeah.
It was no longer the same party. I think it's only got worse since then. I mean, you mentioned the identity politics. The difficulty with this is if you keep telling white people that they have to play identity politics, when they eventually play, they might recognize that they're white and pick that side.
Yeah.
Danny Duchamp, there's a Kiwi libertarian YouTuber who will be speaking in your panel at the Friedman conference.
Yeah.
In another plug.
Yeah.
He did a great video recently saying, trying really hard not to fash, or something like that, saying that if he was to take the talking points of the left seriously, the logical conclusion was for him to become a fascist. But he didn't take their talking points seriously. He, like myself and I think yourself, would prefer to respond by saying, let's get rid of this identity politics. Let's go back to that quaint idea that you should judge a man by the content of his character.
Well, isn't that strange that by today's logic on the left, Martin Luther King would be called an Uncle Tom and a racist because he's because now if you say now that you're colorblind, or at least you try to be colorblind, you can never be completely free of bias, but even if you just attempt to be colorblind, that in and of itself is a racist statement because you're not recognizing people's race, which is the complete 180 to what Martin Luther King was all about.
I've seen that. It's ridiculous, and we really need to respond to that with more mockery. We can't take these comments seriously. We can't allow them to go unchallenged. It is just so stupid. We can't let people think there's a legitimate point to the idea of being non-racist is racist.
Well, I think I watched, I don't know if you're familiar with the New York University psychologist Jonathan Haidt, and he's made the point that the left has gotten so sort of brazen and used to making these arguments and not hearing arguments from the other side that they think saying things like racist, sexist, homophobe is an argument. And I think what the right or just any sort of rational thinking person has forgot is to say, look, that's not an argument. Calling that's not an argument. And as you said, these people need to be ridiculed. Mark Latham made the point. He called sort of civility conservatives. The civility conservatives have to do away with the civility. They have to get a little bit. They have to get down in the mud and wrestle with the pig a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I believe in America they call them cucks. Cuckservative.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro treats the issue quite well as well, I think. He says, the problem is we try to talk about an issue based on an assumption that everyone's doing good and that the other side hasn't heard our argument yet.
Yeah.
But they enter the conversation with the assumption that we're bad people.
Yeah.
And so the actual argument doesn't matter because it's all post hoc rationalization. They're already right because they're good people. They're already wrong because we're bad. And if we allow that to be the premise of the discussion, we lose a lot of arguments when we're having arguments in front of people who are led by their emotions.
Yeah.
We need to win the people over. So we need to stop the discussion as soon as the left starts making this appeal to moral superiority or or name calling or these absurd arguments. We need to immediately stop that conversation and just say that that's bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
And call you out on that. We can't have an argument based on the premise that you think you're a better person than me.
Yeah. And if you're the one who's constantly making references to race or somebody's genitalia, well, then you're the racist, you're the sexist, you're the one that continues to focus on it, you're the one who thinks that it matters, you're the racist. You can just turn it around on them. I think we're too used to, or the right seems to have been cowed. They seem to have fallen for the shaming tactics. And I think Trump represents like a big middle finger to those shaming tactics. Whether Trump turns out to be effective is another question altogether. But that's why people get behind him. I think people have, certain people in the centre left have kind of underestimated the ridiculousness and the divisiveness of identity politics, and they're kind of looking around going, what the hell happened? And it's like, well, what'd you expect?
Well, there does seem to be something of an awakening. If you look at Sargon of Akkad and Dave Rubin, Chris Reagan, there's various, I don't know what to call these people now, because they're still left in many senses.
Yeah.
But they're waking up to the idiocy of the regressive left. So
yeah, absolutely.
Call them the rational left? I don't know what to call these people, but it does seem to be an awakening happening amongst some people on the centre left.
Yeah, Sargon's still got a little bit of red in him. He's got some funny ideas. He's got some ideas about, tying CEO pay as a multiple of the bottom workers' pay and a few things like that. He's got a bit of the redistributionist in him.
I agree. That's why I say these people are still left. I mean, they don't believe what I believe. I'm a pretty stock standard libertarian. So they don't believe everything I believe, but they are distancing themselves from the identity politics, PC authoritarian crowd.
Absolutely.
Which is something to be applauded. Even if they're still getting the economics wrong, at least they're open to free speech and what used to be core liberal values.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what we got here, because you've got such an interesting background. I just want to go through a few things. Do you want to talk at all about what you're up to in Cambodia?
I think probably Australian and American politics is going to be more the bailiwick of your listeners. I'll just mention that since 2007, I've been running a little education charity there called Human Capital Project. We send poor kids to uni. When they graduate, if they do okay, they agree to pitch in some money to send the next generation of kids to uni.
Sure.
It's like a pass-it-forward scheme or a privatized tech scheme. So if any of your listeners had some spare charity money they didn't know where to put, then send them my way and I'll put their money to work.
Well, maybe
for the last couple of years,
you can send me a link and I'll stick that in the description as well.
Yeah, will do. And for the last couple of years, I've been living in Phnom Penh, running a research institute there, trying to bring some good economics to the country. The country is actually quite free at the moment, mostly through just police and political corruption leading to non-enforcement. Anyone can do anything.
Yeah.
But as the country develops, the Western NGOs and the UN types, I generally just refer to them as the UN types, are constantly in the ear of the major political parties saying that if you want to be rich and Western like us, you need lots more regulation, lots more taxes, you need all the dumb policies that the West have, which depresses me because Cambodia is a wonderful country at the moment, and from my perspective, the UN's trying to ruin it.
Yeah.
So I was trying to help build an alternative narrative there where people didn't only have advice from the UN types. I don't know how successful I've been, but that's what I've been trying to do. Now I'm back in Australia. I've come back specifically for the Friedman conference.
Yeah.
This time around, but we'll see how long I stay.
So you've been out of the country for how long this last time?
Since the last Friedman conference. Since the last election, because I stood at the last election.
Okay, yeah. So
I stood for the Libertarian. And once I didn't win that, I went back to Cambodia to continue my research work.
Yeah. How about David Lionhelm? How do you say his name? Is it Lionhelm or Lionhelm?
I constantly get it wrong, which I really shouldn't by now. I think it's Lionhelm.
Yeah. I've had a few people say it's Lionhelm. Now he's fantastic, absolutely brilliant. Love what he does. I just love his straightforward, straight talking. The media paint him as some kind of kook, or which because most of the media is left in this country. They like to paint him as some kind of kook in the media. They rarely give him props for anything. Now, I saw a bit in the paper today about this whole new citizenship bit, that basically the government had stolen a proposal that he'd put forward, or stolen some part of it. It looked a lot like what he'd put forth. Have you been up to date on this citizenship stuff?
I haven't read the legislation or in detail. I've just seen the commentary on it. As I understand it, they've extended the gap between when you have permanent residency and when you can get citizenship.
Yeah, and they've tightened up questions. Well, they're talking about sort of questions like, do you think it's okay to cut the genitals off your daughter? And do you think it's okay to beat your wife? And so, of course, the narrative is, oh, look, the Liberals are targeting Muslims. And the Liberals are going, no, we're not. Well, you are, actually.
What does that implicitly admit about Muslims?
Sorry?
What does that, if they're saying that no domestic violence is an attack on Muslims, what does that implicitly admit about Muslim culture?
Exactly. I don't think they get that they're putting their foot in it straight away. Like, oh, why did you mention Muslims? It wasn't about Muslims. Why are you associating Muslims with domestic? Is it because we just saw a video the other day of 2 Muslim women from Hizb ut-Tahrir saying that it's okay to hit your wife? I mean, would that be it? Would that have anything to do with it? Would Kaiser Trad going on the Bolt report and saying it's okay to hit your wife as a last resort, would that have anything to do with it? I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was an absurd video of those ladies talking about it. But I think the more consequential part of the change is that 4-year delay between PR and citizenship. And I think that's the part that's probably being referred to as stealing from Liberal Democrats policy.
Right.
It's worth pointing out immigration gets a very touchy issue for a lot of people, and having a nuanced position tends to get you hated by everyone.
Yeah.
I think the most coherent libertarian argument is that we should support the idea of people moving, working, and traveling, and we should oppose the idea of people easily swapping passports and getting welfare in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the moment, we combine all of those things together.
Yeah.
If you move to a country and work there, then of course you get a passport and welfare. But that doesn't need to be of course. We can split these two things up. We could have freedom of movement to work as one thing and freedom of changing citizenship as a second thing.
Yeah.
And if we can draw a greater distinction between those two things in people's minds, then we'd be able to simultaneously try to liberalize the movement of people while stopping the 2 parts of immigration that I think are the main concern, which is welfare and being flooded by a hostile voting group.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, this cultural relativism is toxic. This idea that you come to countries and set up your own enclaves and run your own parallel legal systems. Even though it's officially not legal, but I mean, if you look at a place like the United Kingdom, they estimate they have 100 Sharia courts in operation.
Well, those are legal in the UK. They're recognised as alternative arbitration.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a... It just goes against the idea of, what multiculturalism was supposed to be about, which is supposed to be integration, assimilation. Assimilation is now a dirty word, of course, you can't say it. But integration...
I think it's making a comeback.
Sorry?
I think it's making a comeback now. People look at France and Germany and they start thinking,
yeah,
if we want different races, we're going to have to get them to at least assimilate somewhat.
Yeah, we're lucky, aren't we, that we're an island nation and we're so far away, because if I keep saying to people, if Australia was attached to the side of Europe, then we would be no different. We would just have people marching into our country and we'd be seeing the same thing. We're just lucky that we're girt by sea.
We're lucky we're going to be able to see Sweden implode and choose whether we want to learn the lessons or not.
Yeah, yeah.
The countries to have no one to point at, but except logic, which that doesn't necessarily count in politics.
What do you make of, so, and this is new to me, and obviously you've been out of the country on and off for a while, but I come back and I'm old enough, I think I'm a bit older than you. I was in high school, I was 15 in 1989 when the wall came down. Now I remember we discussed this in high school. Back then it was called commerce class, and we discussed, that there was the free world and there was the non-free world, and the non-free world had kind of imploded and the free had won, and it was the end of history. and capitalism won, and communism and collectivism was dead. This was it. And I went to university starting in 1991. I did economics, and Marxism and those kinds of systems were not even mentioned, quite frankly, except in undergraduate economic philosophy and history course. I remember, it came up there. And so I thought, you kind of think these things are established. We've won, capitalism reigns, socialism is dead, communism is dead, and yet we have this resurgent Marxist march through institutions, through academia, and I'm just puzzled as to how this has all come about. I've seen various explanations, but what's your take on it?
I think the mistake, if you need to explain the history of the 20th century in under 30 seconds, then you say one side capitalist, one side communist, capitalist won. If we've got a bit more time, I think the capitalist world wasn't capitalist by the time they won. And we'd been fully colonized by the Social Democrats to the degree that pretty much all conservative parties in the Western world, by the time the Berlin Wall fell, were all saying, don't worry, we believe in socialized medicine. Don't worry, we believe in a big welfare state. Don't worry, we believe in a regulatory state and a nanny state.
Yep.
So when the conservatives were fully bought into the Fabian agenda, I still think that's better than communism.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit idealistic or simplistic to say that the capitalism won. The liberal capitalism,
yeah,
the libertarianism, had already lost under LGB and Whitlam.
Yeah.
LBG.
Yeah.
Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, thank you. So yeah, by the time in the 60s and 70s that we'd fully established the welfare, regulatory, nanny, police state, and it was still better for that welfare state to beat communism, but I believe that social democracy is self-defeating ultimately, for reasons that we wouldn't be able to fit into this talk. But I believe it's economically going to implode because people just have an incentive to vote themselves. More handouts, and the aging population means that we can't afford health and pensions.
Yeah.
But the democracy means we can't get rid of them. So the solution is debt until bankruptcy. And I think the welfare state creates a culture of irresponsibility. And I think the nature of politics in a welfare state creates a mentality where you always look to the government to give you something. The opposition always tells you that you deserve it.
Yeah.
And you'll get it if you just vote for a different party. And I think that naturally leads to disillusionments because they can never actually achieve their promises because they were lying. They were either intentionally lying or quite stupid themselves. And when they can't achieve their promises, people get disillusioned, pick the other party a few times, then realize both parties let them down, and then they start searching for alternatives. And that's when you start seeing the rise of the wacky left and the wacky right.
Yeah.
And it's a worrying trend, but I can't see how social democracy doesn't end up that way with economic, cultural, and political collapse. So it's good that social democracy beat communism, but we really need to beat social democracy if we want the system to sustain itself.
Yeah.
I fear that the only way that might happen is that some countries are just going to have to implode, and hopefully some other countries learn the lessons.
Yeah, I'm looking at France at the moment because even like people, Marine Le Pen and she's far right. Have a look at her policies; they're very socialist. And Donald Trump is not particularly. I mean, he's bringing in things like maternity leave and other kinds of things. He believes in affirmative action to get more women in STEM, all this kind of nonsense.
I believe he's an ideology-free zone. I don't think Trump has a core ideology.
Yeah.
As if you look at other populist movements, that UKIP did start with a relatively conservative ideology or small government ideology.
Yeah.
They sold out a bit on, but Nigel Farage is naturally inclined towards smaller government. Le Pen has always been philosophically dedicated to big government.
Yeah.
They're all linked because of their opinions on Islam and immigration, but I think it's I could have seen myself supporting UKIP. I couldn't see myself supporting Le Pen.
Yeah.
And the difference is their attitude towards how much should the government control everyone's life.
Yeah, that's the disappointing part because everybody focuses on that. Yes, so she's anti-immigration, anti-Muslim, and everybody rallies around that. But they don't. What's the economic agenda? Okay, Trump believes in tax cuts. Okay, what do the rest of them believe in? And Trump actually, what else did he proposed that for every regulation they made, they'd have to tear up two, which is not bad.
That's right. That's nice, but what he proposed is that every time they introduce a new regulation, they have to point out 2 other regulations that might be removed.
Right, right.
So that's a lot easier. It's a lot less radical. It would be nice if he did what everyone says he did, but he didn't actually go that far.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah, but like you said, I mean, politicians. I was looking at this the other day. I was looking at a survey. I forget who put it out, but the trust in politicians today is lower in Australia than it was during the 1975 constitutional crisis. That's how bad trust in politicians are, and yet the public still looks to the government to do something, as though the government needs to do something. And I don't know. I mean, we need a movement where people run on the platform as that government is not going to do anything except get out of the way. Get out of the way, allow more freedom, tax you less, and get out of your life. But people don't actually, at their heart, even though if you ask them, are you interested in freedom? Oh, yeah, I love freedom. But when you explain to them what freedom is, they seem to back away a bit. They actually like a lot of the nanny state, the entitlement state.
Yeah, freedom alone isn't enough to win political arguments. We also need to point out that the logical consequence of freedom is that most people will end up with a better life.
Yeah.
But you point out the contradiction that exists in a lot of politics. We've got to remember that voters are generally rationally ignorant. So it's not that people are stupid when they contradict themselves. They just have more important things to do with their time other than study economics and politics.
Yeah.
But you'll often get a response of, I want the government to do more, but politicians to do less.
Yeah.
Which obviously is internally contradictory, but in people's mind, the government is there to help them, politicians are evil.
Yeah.
But I think this goes back to the point I was making before about the inherent instability of social democracy, or politics in social democracy.
Yeah.
Because the incentive for every opposition party is to say, you know, those impossible promises that government made and then didn't achieve, I'll do that. You do deserve that. And the only reason you haven't got it is that the current government is being mean to you.
Yeah.
Now, the truth is what they promise is just impossible. It can't be done.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to get elected, that's not relevant, right? So you say it is possible, it can be done, but the current people are being mean.
Yeah.
And so we learn over and over again that the only reason we're not getting more bags of free goodies is that we haven't voted for the right person yet.
Yeah.
If we just try to find that mythical right person, we'll eventually get infinite bags of free goodies.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, social democracy, just by definition, the government grows. It has to. It insinuates itself in more and more aspects of people's lives. I was absolutely horrified to learn just when they passed a new childcare bill not long ago that people a household bringing in $300 up to $500,000 was getting childcare subsidies in this country. I mean, that's not middle class welfare. That's upper class welfare, and they cut it. Yeah. They cut it to $350. So if you're a household bringing in $300,000 a year, and taxpayers are subsidising your childcare, that's just absolute insanity. And this
is one of the main. Yeah. So this is one of the main things that David Leyonhjelm has been pushing. And you mentioned before that the mainstream media seems intent on not taking him seriously.
Yeah.
But one of his main points is that perhaps we could just give welfare to the poor people and not the rich people. Yeah. Surely that's a reasonable thing to say.
Isn't that what it was intended for in the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of welfare was started when it was only applied to a very small sliver. The problem is, once you create that way to get money, you create an incentive for people to pursue livelihoods that get them that free money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the incentive problem. Welfare states can work fine when you first introduce them, but you just put the country on a path towards unsustainability.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the idea that I put out a tweet actually about that. David Leyonhjelm liked my tweet because somebody was saying, "Oh, we need to support families," and I said, "Why do you get to put your hand in your pocket to pay for your children that you decided to have? Why am I paying for your life choices that you decided to have?"
And that's the nice thing about having someone like David Leyonhjelm, or to a lesser degree someone like Donald Trump, or various people finally pushing back against this mainstream political media education orthodoxy. And previously no one sort of stopped the speaker, the mainstream media speaker, and said, wait a second, why do you just get free stuff?
Yeah.
And finally, someone's starting to push back on that. And of course, because often on the left, they haven't had to defend these ideas. They can just assert them. That means they often don't have the intellectual support or the evidence behind them.
Yeah.
Because no one's really challenged them before. They just get away with it.
Well, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That the left always tries to occupy the moral high ground because they say, oh, look, we're for the poor, downtrodden people. You know, we're sticking... It's like, actually, no, you're the immoral ones, because what you think you get to do is stick your hand in everybody's pockets and redistribute it to other people. Some small elected little group of people get to do that. That's fundamentally immoral. That you just get to take...
The problem is, and we were discussing this before the stream started, the left enters so many... I'm being a little unfair. There are good people on the left, but if you allow me the shorthand, they approach so many arguments with the assumption that they're good people and the assumption that we're bad people. And once you start with that assumption, they've already assumed they're correct. The actual argument is just post hoc rationalization. That's just the words you have to say when you're on TV. But they're not actually looking at the arguments to find out where the truth leads. Whereas, and this again is an overgeneralization, but often on the right, we will assume that the person on the left is interested in the evidence.
Yep.
That's a bit of a mistake. And we'll assume that they have good intentions.
Yeah.
And realistically, once they've assumed we don't have good intentions, that means they don't have good intentions. And we need to call them on it. Instead of allowing them to get away with controlling the moral narrative. When they try to assert that they're the moral ones, we need to call them on it and say that's just bullshit. If you were moral, you would be paying for the stuff out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
But you're not. You're saying there that you're moral because you'll steal from me and give it to you.
Yeah, I think that more needs to be made of the fact that a lot of the, say, Greens who, go to Hyde Park and hold the candles up about, bringing the refugees, don't actually take into refugees where they actually live. They all go to Western Sydney and some poor part of Western Sydney, and they never see them. It's all about virtue signalling. I feel better. It's about making yourself feel good and then virtue signalling to everyone that you're a good person.
Arthur Brooks wrote a great book, maybe 5 or 10 years ago now, called Who Really Cares?
Right.
Which looks into the details in America and finds out which groups of people, what traits make you more likely to volunteer your time, donate your money, to even they had one experiment where it was just asking strangers on the street for directions. What sort of people stopped for longer and helped you get to where you needed to go? And there were a few things that were consistently correlated with being nicer. One was having a religion. It didn't seem to matter which one, but having one helps, which doesn't work in my advantage because I'm not religious. But another one that was statistically significant was that if you didn't believe the government should be redistributing money, you were more likely to be a nice person.
Yeah.
Which goes against the narrative that is so common, people just assume it without ever checking the evidence, that people against welfare are against compassion.
No.
And the evidence is quite clear that the people against welfare are often more compassionate.
Yeah, because they actually want to, they want to empower people to their own economic security. They don't just want them to suck off the teat of government. They realise that that's not an incentive. It's an incentive to stay in that situation, not get yourself out of it. I mean, the right is sort of saying, the pick yourself up by the bootstraps is the right. It's an aspirational sentiment. The redistributionist sentiment is not. It's born of a politics of envy.
I think there's truth in what you're saying, but it's more than that, because I think redistribution can be useful as long as it's voluntary.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of charities out there. There's plenty of mutual groups. There's plenty of people that help other people out there. And I do think that sometimes people can't necessarily pick themselves up without help.
Sure.
But I think if you look at the evidence, as I have, and I'll be speaking about this at the Friedman conference, another plug, that's the best way to help people is to make sure the people helping them are as close to them in their community as possible. Not some distant bureaucrat being funded and told what to do by Canberra.
Yeah.
But someone from their local community who actually cares about them and who has the ability to turn off the tap if the person is a total prick.
Yep.
You need to give them the incentives that make them feel like when they're getting help that they are imposing a cost on their neighbor, so that they don't want to impose that cost more than they need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gives them the incentive to help themselves as well. But I mean, this isn't anti-redistribution, it's anti-government redistribution.
Sure. Yeah, I'm all for redistribution and charity if it's voluntary.
And I think if you look at the evidence on how voluntary groups work vis-a-vis the welfare state, and you judge it entirely based on what helps poor people the most, what helps people who need help the most, I put to you that the welfare state does worse. That mutual societies and charity and a free society of compassionate people actually is better for the recipient. Obviously, it's better for the taxpayer because we're not being robbed. But that's the common argument. But I think this is a powerful argument that if you care about the recipient, you should want to shut down big parts of the welfare state.
Absolutely.
For me, all of it, but I'll take half.
Yeah, that would be a start. What do you make of this? Is maybe we can shift gears here a little bit. What do you make of the inability of the Liberal Party to actually sell a cut to penalty rates? I mean, this should be a no-brainer. The Productivity Commission that Bill Shorten helped set up actually came out and said, you know, this is a good move, especially for small businesses. It affects, I think, 7% of people on those wages. It's only the retail sector, but the Liberal Party has been absolutely. I think they thought what they could do was say, well, the Productivity Commission said that we should do it, so therefore we should do it. But then you've got to go out and sell to people that we're cutting your wages. And they were completely incapable of getting business behind them. Business didn't really say anything.
Well, yeah, business is behind them. They just don't say anything. And I think there's a good public choice reason for that. So I don't hold any individual person too much to blame because I think this is the nature of politics under a welfare regulatory nanny state. If I can just do a little diversion and just mention, for anyone who was interested in that chat before about government welfare versus private charity, which is the best way to actually help people. We do have a panel discussion specifically on this topic and compassion and the role of compassion in a free society at the Friedman Conference, where I'll be speaking with Gabe Buckley as well, the national president of the Liberal Democrats, and a few others.
That's on Saturday morning, is that right?
Will be on, Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon.
I think that is. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but people can see it on the w's.friedman17.org. There's the schedule up there. So going back to your question, I just got to maximize my number of plugs, but the nature of being a mainstream political party means that you have to be saying what 51% of people already believe most of the time. If you don't, someone else will come and say it and you'll lose. This is why I think minor parties play such an important role, because minor parties don't have to say things that are 51% popular. Minor parties can stand up and support something that's 10% popular or even 5% popular if those 5% are passionate enough. And they can do that in a way that's much harder than think of it from the perspective of a mainstream politician that's trying not to lose their seat. They will rationalize to themselves, if I lose, I can't do any good. So the first thing I need to do is win. How do you tell people that they should get lower wages? Now, of course, you can explain to them that this is an insider-outsider thing and that the current laws basically hurt outsiders to prop up insiders, and if you add it all up on net, it's quite clear that it creates a net cost. And that's all true, but how many of the average voters are going to go to that much detail on that one issue?
Well, that's why if you could have done what Corey Bernardi suggested after the fact, but I was saying this before it. I mean, you come out and say, look, because there was quite a few scandals going on about politicians abusing their entitlements. You say, we're going to freeze politicians' pay. We're in it with you. We're going to freeze politicians' pay to the next election for the next 3 years or whatever it is. That's how you sell it.
I think that'd give you a small bump, but then Jackie Lambie would just say freeze politicians' pay and keep the high award wages. And then that's going to be instinctively popular to 80% of people who won't do more than a minute's research on the whole issue. And one issue here is that people who are politically engaged, and obviously you are and I am and people listening to this are, we assume that other people are politically engaged. This is our world.
I run into so many social justice warriors, I don't assume that.
They're engaged in something about politics. They're trying to talk about something. The issue is, or we think that it's possible to get people to be engaged, if only we say things persuasively enough. The fundamental problem with, and this is a fundamental problem with politics in general, it's one of the reasons I'm instinctively skeptical of politics. People have a finite amount of time. We are rationally ignorant. That's hugely crucial words. If we could just get people to understand public choice theory, they would understand a lot of politics. But people are rationally ignorant. That doesn't mean they're dumb. You'd know very little about the mating habits of the South Bolivian llama. Right? And that's not because you're dumb. That's because you have no incentive to get that information. Now, do you have incentive to get the information about your kids' netball practice, or where to do some overtime to get some money, or where to buy that present for your wife? You've got strong incentive to get information in a lot of things you do with your life. And that's because you have complete control over the action. If I decide to go to KFC, I will go to KFC. I didn't need to ask 16 million people. So because you have direct control of that outcome, you become informed. In voting, you have a 1 in 16 million say. A 1 in 16 million, that's a very small number. You have that say once every 3 years, and realistically, you have to choose between two options that are pretty similar. So let's cut through the bullshit and admit it. Your vote is almost worthless. Now, most people implicitly recognize this, and you see it by the fact that most people put in nearly no time researching their vote. But that isn't because they're bad people. That isn't because they're dumb people. It's an unsolvable problem caused by the fact that their vote is basically worthless. The only way to get them to get informed is either to convince them that it's a good hobby, and that's basically describes you and me. We treat this as a hobby. Or to trick them that their vote matters, which requires you tricking them because they're too stupid to work out that 1 divided by 16 million is a small number. If they're too stupid to work that out, then I don't trust them to work anything else out. So this is an insolvable problem. Insoluble problem. So I don't blame the mainstream parties for having to do what they'd have to do to stay in power, which is to appeal to the instincts of voters. Now, some instincts can be good. But instincts aren't necessarily good. And whatever the instincts are, you'll end up finding both major parties somewhere close to those instincts. Brian Kaplan, by the way, wrote a great book on this called The Myth of the Rational Voter, where he identified what a lot of our instincts are: the anti-foreigner bias, the make-work bias. I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head. And they all make sense from an evolutionary psychology perspective. But that's just background information that doesn't help us solve it. The end consequence of that is that mainstream political parties will never be the solution.
So what do you think? What do you think needs to happen? You actually alluded to this before, and perhaps this will be your answer. Do you think that social democracies have to devour themselves for anything like a libertarian point of view to be popular or be embraced?
I think the only way that I just call it good economic policy. I think that is a synonym with libertarian policy. But the only way for us to get to good economic policy will be if political power is decentralized as much as possible. And what that does is it creates another powerful force that opposes the instinctive populism of mainstream parties. And that alternative powerful force is jurisdictional competition between states, between countries, between local governments. If all of the people and all the capital and all the money is flowing over the border, even if it's populism is telling you to do one thing, there's going to be strong counter pressure to stop doing the thing that's killing your jurisdiction, that's killing your state. And I think power has to be decentralized quite a bit more than it is for that to work.
Well, we have the exact opposite here. I mean, we reward the states that do badly. I mean, the states that do well subsidize the states that do badly. That's the complete wrong incentive.
If you introduce reform that's in the short term and helps you in the long term, you get all the pain, and when the benefit comes around, they steal half of it and give it to Tasmania and South Australia. But I think jurisdictional competition, political decentralization is the only institutional force strong enough to be a good counter pressure to the problem of rational ignorance and public choice. How do we get there? I don't know. This is one of the reasons I was so opposed to the EU, because it seemed like another example of centralizing power, just taking away the only thing we have, which is that competition between states, between jurisdictions.
Yeah, well, I thought it was ridiculous. I remember this in the 90s, and I worked in finance for a while, and I remember just the idea that you could put all these different countries with very different fiscal policies, and not only that, very different economies, and you could put them all under the one currency. The currency idea was just ridiculous, and so now you have the very predictable outcome of something like Greece that would have been able to devalue its currency if it was still on the drachma and trade its way out of.
Finally, we get to something we disagree on.
Oh, really?
I think you're 100% wrong on this.
Really?
Firstly, in terms of different countries being able to use the same currency or very different cultures, the main currency used in Cambodia is the US dollar.
Yeah.
And because of that, Cambodia has had one of the most stable currencies of the region, because other countries keep devaluing their currency, exactly what you said Greece should do, which creates inflation. And if you don't fix the underlying problem, the only solution is more inflation.
Yeah, but
And I don't think that's a very smart road to go
Greece
down.
is a complete zombie and still a zombie economy.
The only way to fix that is to get their spending back under their revenue. And saying they can devalue their currency allows them to not fix the problem, create inflation, which is basically stealing off anyone who saves. So you're stealing off people who save so that you can stay irresponsible.
Yeah, well,
I don't want that. I want to be responsible.
That's a good point. I mean, I wouldn't just want to devalue. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest problems in Greece was that you could retire at 55. They didn't actually collect taxation in a consistent manner. It was very lax, and they spent way more than they brought in. It was just a completely unsustainable problem.
And the only that unsustainable fiscal situation is to fix the fiscal situation. And people looking for solutions in monetary policy is dangerous. That's exactly Keynesian thinking.
Yeah, I would have done both though. I would have liked them to be on the drachma and do the fiscal reforms. But you're saying that if they're on the drachma, then and they devalue, then there's no incentive to fix the fiscal situation.
If they were on the drachma, they would be valued. There's no chance of giving them the drachma and then asking them to please be responsible. They are not responsible. If you give them the option of devaluing, stealing by fraud and no one seeing it, or directly cutting pensions, 100 out of 90 politicians are going to pursue inflation instead of cutting pensions.
Oh, yeah.
So the only thing that fiscal discipline on Greece at the moment is that they're in the Eurozone. The thing that creates fiscal discipline on Cambodia at the moment is that they use the US dollar. The only way they stopped in runaway inflation in Zimbabwe was by switching to the US dollar. I mean, when you give irresponsible countries control of their currency, they're irresponsible with it. They screw up their currency and they don't fix the underlying problems.
Yeah, I remember.
And I don't trust the Greek.
Yeah, I remember traveling through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia back into Thailand back in, 99, 2000, I think it was. And they all preferred US dollars, even Vietnam, Laos. You'd pay, like you might buy a bowl of noodles in Laos with kip, but you'd pay for your hotel in dollars. That's the way they liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because they understood that the US dollar was less likely to be inflated away.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows how long that'll stay true for.
Yeah.
But at least for the moment, they understood that their own government wasn't likely to be responsible with the currency.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson to remember.
Yeah. So
talk about.
But you don't like the EU, not on the euro grounds, but just the centralized operation, as you say, no competition between states, huge bureaucracy making decisions from afar.
To me, it's an institutional question, like a meta question, setting the rules of the game. Where are those rules going to lead? And if you have centralized power, I believe, and I think the evidence backs me up, that centralized power will lead inevitably to bigger government.
Yeah.
And I think the only examples we've seen where places haven't led to bigger government is because of a significant amount of decentralization of power. You go back 100 years, Switzerland had the biggest government in Europe.
Yeah.
Now, Switzerland has one of the smallest governments in Europe. What's changed? Every other country in Europe has much bigger government. The Swiss government hasn't grown.
Yeah.
Why is that? Significant decentralizations to the cantons.
Yep.
And they stayed out of the EU.
Yeah, I actually reported on a story not long ago where a particular canton was able to prevent a woman from getting citizenship in Switzerland because she was too annoying, because she kept complaining about cowbells and all these kinds of things in the countryside. And the canton had the power to say, no, she's not getting it.
Well, I've got to the point in considering this issue that it's more important to me that power is decentralized than exactly what the local council then does with their power. There's going to be lots of things that local governments would do with power that I wouldn't like. But I think it's more important that the power is decentralized than that I agree with every decision they take.
Yeah.
So whether they treated that lady appropriately or not.
Yeah, she was a definite nutter. She was no doubt. She was just an environmental greenie, and she prized animals' lives over other people and all this kind of thing. But she was a nutter. But she was appealing it, as I remember as well. She was able to appeal it.
Yeah, so that's the short version of my synopsis of the future of the West is populism versus decentralization.
Yeah.
And I'm not that's my side, our side, the freedom side is going to win that until a few countries spectacularly implode and force everyone to take a good hard look at themselves and maybe make a few hard decisions.
Do you want to make a couple of predictions on who you think in Europe? I mean, I know I have a few in mind. Who you'd think would go by the wayside first?
Most people seem to base their predictions on their assessment of the culture or the amount of cultural strife. If I was to do this properly, I'd want to sit down with their budget papers.
Yeah.
I think France is in a difficult situation. I think we're not talking much about Spain anymore, but from what I remember, last time I looked, their finances are
awful.
Are very precarious.
Yeah, I mean, I followed this a lot during the financial crisis. I actually had a financial blog going, and Spain was, after Greece, Spain was the next worst. I mean, their unemployment rate amongst youth was 40 or 50% at some point, I think, and it hasn't improved that much.
One of the interesting things out of Italy will be to see what happens with the Lega Nord, because I think North Italy is potentially a viable state, but I don't know if Italy is if it stays together. I think France is in more trouble than Germany, even though everyone points at Germany because of the 2 million Syrians.
Yeah.
I think the more immediate trigger of collapse will be defaulting.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that, and I think that's because probably you and I look at things from an economic perspective, because Germany's actually quite solid. I mean, if you wanted to pick a good economy in Europe, you know, you've got Switzerland and Germany at the top of the list, really. France is terrible; they're in awful shape. And
I have a lot of sympathy with the people pointing out the cultural difficulties going on in Germany and in Sweden. But unless there's a trigger, those cultural problems will just sit there simmering.
Yeah.
Like the country won't fall apart. He'll just continue having bad headlines. Yeah. What's actually the trigger for the collapse? I think the trigger for the collapse will be a financial trigger.
Yeah.
You said you had some opinions on which countries would be the first to fall?
Well, I was going to say France. Yeah, I was going to say France. I was just looking at the menu of politicians that are about to be elected, and I don't think any of them provide any decent solutions, not economically. I mean, the guy who's I can't pronounce his name. He's sort of centre right. He actually does talk about
Yeah, no, I think not that I'm a big fan of him, but I think the least worst option they have is Fillon. But he looks like he's going to drop down into fourth in current polling.
Yeah.
And the person that's shot up out of nowhere and could be in the running is someone endorsed by the Communist Party who wants 100% income tax over
$500,000
income,
wasn't it? Yeah. I heard that 100. I mean, fucking hell. We just don't seem to learn from history at all, do we?
Well, I've been lecturing on and off the last couple of years. I've been lecturing a lot of the time about dynamic tax analysis, and we use France as an example of they introduced a higher top marginal tax rate. Their revenue went down. They cut their top marginal tax rate. Their revenue went up. Now, that's not always true. That's only true when you're dealing with very high tax numbers.
Yeah.
So if the 30% rate in Australia was moved up to 33%, the government would get more revenue.
Yeah.
Right? But when you take a 60% tax rate on the people that are best at hiding their money, and you take that up to 70 or 80, you don't get more revenue. In France's case, in the UK's case as well, they actually got less revenue.
Yeah, people leave the country. Didn't Gerard Depardieu leave the country?
He's now a Russian. Yeah. One of the most annoying things about this commie and his daft ideas of 100% tax is it's going to just blow a bigger hole in their budget. Meanwhile, you know as a commie, it's going to increase spending. So it's not even competent socialism.
No.
It's
economic suicide.
The centrist guy is like a competent socialist.
Yeah, I know.
But
I don't know if you do you get Sky News? I mean, I know I think you're couch surfing at the moment, but last night or the night before, Andrew Bolt interviewed a Fox News reporter who was in Paris, and she said, "Look, it's just socialism, because Bolt was under the impression that Le Pen was economically to the right, and she's going, no. And she was kind of schooling Andrew Bolt, and he was looking quite confused. But, I mean, you came away from that interview just thinking, France is absolutely screwed unless what's his name, Fillon was able to get up. But that doesn't seem likely. They're in all
Yeah, well, he had a scandal about his wife working for him illegally.
Okay.
And he tanked in the polls after that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's not a friendly place to look.
No.
Europe at the moment, but we'll see.
All right, we're
So what's next?
well, we're coming up on the hour mark. You okay to keep going, or?
Oh, well, I mean, probably don't want to stretch the patience of the listener too much. But
Yeah.
is there many things left on the plate?
There's a certain type of dedicated listener who will listen to this, but there's not many of them. They tend not to most subscribers tend not to sort of want to cease anything past 20 minutes. So I mean, there's a lot we could talk about. I think there's plenty of things, but maybe we could cut it there. We can do this again. There's plenty to talk about.
Well, we were talking a little bit before about Mark Latham and the rise of the outsider in Australia.
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat now, if you'll allow me. I'm curious to know how you see that.
Oh, I think it's well. I've always been a big fan of Mark Latham, and the kind of I tell you what a lot of people don't realize who are not in the YouTube community. When I put a clip up of Mark Latham, you should see the reception it gets. And I'm not talking just in Australia. I'm talking about internationally. People, Americans coming and go, who is this guy? Can we have him in our country? He's fantastic. He resonates because he cuts through the bullshit, and he's eloquent as well. He's articulate, and he knows what he's talking about.
Like Trump talk.
Yeah, exactly. I think
Trump talk.
I think he's really onto something. I thought that the Outsiders show was absolutely shit hot. I think it's a tragedy that he got canned, but he has the potential. I don't know if he has the potential to build something just as good or better. But I think that there is a lot of people who would get behind him.
After he got canned, we were chatting about, because he's speaking at the Friedman conference as well, so it was emails about that. I was trying to pitch to him, there's this rise of alt media, there's the rise of YouTube media, and I think he would do quite well. I mean, someone he could look to for inspiration would be someone like Ezra Levant from the Rebel Media, who, again, another pitch, is also coming into the Friedman conference next week. But I think a lot of people would gravitate to a alt media site that included Latham. Yeah. And he wouldn't take long for him to get more listeners than he did on Sky.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think a lot of people aren't clued up as to how big an audience you have on YouTube or just alt media in general. I mean, just think about the fact that Sky News Australia has a website, and they put out sort of Andrew Bolt editorials and a few other clips, and they get view counts like 700, 2,000, 1,500. Now, I regularly get 10,000, 15,000 on a video. Sometimes I get 50,000. Depends what the topic is. That's me, some guy sitting in his boxer shorts in his lounge room by himself, just talking into a microphone, and I'm getting those kinds of views. I have a relatively small channel. You think Mark Latham started a YouTube channel tomorrow, he'd be getting, give him a couple of weeks, he'd be getting views in the tens of thousands, and then he'd be getting in the hundreds of thousands. The exposure would be huge. I just don't think...
I mean, if you take Baring's view count as an example, that dwarfs TV stations now.
Yeah.
And he does it pretty casually. He does it having fun at the same time. Yeah. I think Mark Latham could easily get into that category. Maybe team up with a few people who've already been around the Australian alt media scene, yourself, a few others. We could create an Australian rebel that actually would be a source for alternative information in the country.
Yeah. Do you know Claire Lehman? She's in
Yes.
Yeah,
she's the rebel person in Australia. She's the one that contacted me about doing an interview with Latham at the Friedman conference, which is sorted. Latham's happy to do a few interviews with alt media.
Yeah, because she's another one. There are people around, and I think it's a bit like sort of herding cats. But yeah, I'd love to be part of that and get that going. I'd get behind anything with Latham at the helm. I think he'd be.
Yeah, well, I think Latham would be the trigger. That name recognition would really allow everyone else to come together behind a figurehead, perhaps.
Yep.
Well, if we can convince him next week, we'll all be there. So,
sure.
Along with listeners that contact you.
Yep. Now, if I'm remembering rightly, Latham and Ross Cameron are the last session on the last day. Is that right?
Yes, so they're on the same day as you, and they're after your session.
Yep.
There's your session, then there's a half an hour break, and then there's Latham and Cameron. So it's actually pretty well timed for people that wanted to hear you and Mark.
Yeah, that'll be good. I mean, I don't suspect there's many people that want to hear me, but
This is your channel. Our listeners know who you are.
Yeah.
I should also mention that after Latham and Cameron, that's supposed to be the end of official proceedings. Yep. But it's likely now that after that we're going to show a screening of the Red Pill.
That's unfortunate because I probably have to head off to the airport pretty soon after that. I'm flying out.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm flying out Sunday night on the last Virgin flight. Yeah. But, I mean, it is pretty close. I mean, Central's, 12-minute train ride. It's not that far, is it? But we'll see how we go.
This is my town. I'm a Brisbane boy, or actually Sunshine Coast. But...
Oh, right. Maroochydore. Mooloolaba.
Yeah, a bit inland on a little hobby farm.
Yeah, nice area. All right, man.
Anyway, so should we call that a day?
Yeah, let's call it a day. And if you can... Oh, well, just stay on the line when we go out here and we'll have a little bit of a chat because I got to get some of those links off you to certain things and need to ask you a couple of questions. So thanks a lot for coming on, John. It was very good, very interesting.
No problem. Thank you, and I hope we can do this again. And next time I'll be able to call you by your name.
Okay, mate. Thanks.